Brian, welcome to Good Movie Monday. I think I can speak on behalf of Ben as well. It's a real pleasure to have you, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Your work has been quite integral to me personally, my whole film journey and the things I do with film circles from those Empire days through to Fantastic Factory. We reference your work a lot, so yeah, it does certainly mean a lot to me. I've got a question for you to begin with that I'm sure you probably get a lot, but I'm going to go for it anyway. We're going to start with Society. A lot of horror fans associate the name Brian Yuzna with shunting. How does that legacy sit with you?
I love it. I mean, I grew up as a horror movie fan, and not just horror, but the weird, surrealism, weird stuff, expressionism. And I don't really see I see it all on a continuum, and so for me, with Society, as you probably know, the original script already had the paranoia, already had kind of the story, but it was a blood cult. And as a kind of a fan of the weird, I thought, if I'm going to get a chance to direct a movie, by God, it's going to have something in it that's weird that I haven't seen before. And so by coming up with the shunting with Screaming Mad George, and of course, the writers of the script, Woody Keith, now his name is now Zeth Daniels, and Rick Fry, it was basically based on an image that I had of bodies melding together. So I just thought, wow, I'd like to see that on screen. And then I kind of back engineered it to make the movie support it. And I think that's how a lot of narratives work that way. You kind of have some idea of what you would like to see, and then you find a way to make it happen. For example, on Bride of Reanimator, through all the versions of the Reanimator sequel that I worked on, there was one character that always remained, and I'm not talking about Herbert West and Dan Cade. It was the finger eye creature. I just had this idea that I just wanted to see that. But then you have to find a story that will make it happen, if you follow me.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the way the shunting came about. I think the term shunting came from Woody Keith. And I should say this, the script of Society was a script that already existed. It was a spec script that the writers gave to me. And I just happened to be in a position to make a movie. And but that script was really informed. Woody Keith was Bill Whitney. It's like an autobiography. Sounds crazy, of course, but in creative narrative, that is what happens. You always use something of your own in it. And so that's what happened here. The shunting ended up being just because I like weird stuff. And I also thought it might be fun. Being a child of the 60s, I was involved in all the anti-war stuff and all that stuff in the 60s when politics was fun, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is a great way to make a new monster. As a horror fan, we're always stuck with the same, the Wolfman, the vampire, the zombie, the werewolf, Frankenstein. And so I thought, wow, you don't get that much chance to try to make a new monster, a new kind of horror villain. And I thought, wow, to do it with a whole class of people, because I just love that scene. I just love what happens in it.
So do we. We talk about it all the time.
Every sexual encounter I've ever had, I've referred to as the shunting. That's how I talk about it. And I mean, like, but that, like, I've got the VHS cover here, like that image there. I don't know if you can see it, of the face in the butt.
Right.
The butt is possibly, like, it is the most iconic horror image that I've ever, like, had in my entire life. Like, it is the shunting is the shibboleth of any encounter you have with another horror fan. It's like, you know, if you know, you know, and it always comes up, like, always.
Yeah. Well, that stuff was a lot of fun to work with Screaming Mad George, because, as you know, he bills himself as a surrealistic special effects artist. And now, you know, he's Japanese. His birth name was Joji Tani, and he went to New York when he was young, and we're talking about the early 80s here, when punk was still a thing in New York at the CBGB's and Max's Kansas City. You know, the Ramones and the Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. And well, George was in a band called The Mad. And The Mad was an art punk band, right? There's all kinds of punks. And so George was in The Mad. He was in an art punk band. He's a musician. And so he really loved Screaming Jay Hawkins. You know, Screaming Jay Hawkins had this incredible act where he'd come out of a coffin to sing, right?
Yeah.
And so Joji Tani, you know, Asians often have to somehow make their names more Western because we don't quite have the same, you know, kind of building blocks of our language. And so Joji, of course, becomes George. And so he called himself Screaming Mad George. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that this is coming from art background. George is an artist. So when he did punk music, he was a visual artist kind of doing punk music. And people and he's a huge Dali fan. So you see in his art, he does tons of surrealistic stuff. And surrealism, as you know, a lot of it is just free associative. Synesthesia and free associative kind of activity. I mean, Bob Dylan is free associative, but he's not a surrealist. But you just kind of like me saying, I want to see the bodies meld together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So let's do that and see what happens. Well, George does bodies melding together. He does feet with faces. You know, he never really hit it big in LA special effects as a special effects company because he's too original. And the companies that do really well are companies that are more mainstream, that it isn't so personal. With George, you would never hire Mad George to do like just a head getting cut off or somebody being disallowed. You can get guys who work for K&B to do that, and they'll put their heart and soul into it.
Yep.
But for George, you got to give him something weird.
So you've got this concept, right? It's like the most disgusting, repulsive, yet deliciously crazy thing on earth. How do you convince all of these middle-aged, elderly actors to participate in it?
Well, that was a great revelation to me. I mean, it didn't come all at once, but when I started getting into movies, And you have to understand, I never even thought about getting into movies until I was in my 30s, right? I was a hippie. I was I had little businesses. I even painted paintings. I never thought that was an option like people do today. When I was growing up, the big dream was to be the great American novelist, to write a novel. Well, now it's to direct, right? To be the directors are great artists now, even if all they're making is a short film. They're just, you're an artist. Although maybe I'm way behind the times and it's really video games or something that are.
I was listening to the commentary on Society where you talk about how you just turned up and you became a producer because you thought the producer was the person in charge. So that's what I'll do. And
I just, somebody told me. I had no idea because I have no qualifications to be in the movie business at all. But I think that makes me relatable to, right? Because most of us don't. Now, I know people, I have friends who from the time they're in high school, they just want to make movies, Well, I was as big a movie fan as anybody growing up. I tended to like horror. That was my top genre, but I loved all movies. But there was nothing out there that made you think that it was a viable kind of business. Parents weren't into it. I didn't live in LA. Now you can live anywhere. There was no YouTube. There were no tutorials. There was no way for you to know anything if you didn't get a book. And, books are always 5 years behind the times at least. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have any notion of that. But when I did get the feeling that when I did have some experiences that made me think, let me try this. Well, I still didn't have any qualifications. By then I was in my 30s. I was married, but somebody told me that a producer was the boss and he made the most money. And I thought, well, to be honest, I've always wanted to be the boss and I always want to make the most money. Now, I didn't understand that the director got all the credit. Right? So if you produce a movie, it turns out everybody runs over to lift the director on their shoulders. And so then, of course, I had to direct. Now, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that egotistical about it. There is something about when you're on a movie set, I bet half the people on that set look at the director and say, I could do that. Because it seems like the choices are so arbitrary. What color should we paint the wall? Red. He said red. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like from the outside, in general. Of course, there's much more to it, and they're definitely their real technique and skills to directing. You can study to become a director of let's say audiovisual narratives, whatever they may be. And you can study it and you can learn it and you can practice it and you can be qualified. Are you going to be great? That's talent. We don't know how to and luck and a lot of luck and talent and but you can learn it. Now I never did. So all I did was I just learned from producing Stuart Gordon, producing, Christoph Gans, Jaume Balagueró, Paco Plaza, by producing other people. And I learned different ways to direct, and I learned different kind of production designers. You watch professionals work, and if you pay attention, then you I guess you pick up something. I don't, I think society, I was just like,
well,
pedal to the metal, with no guardrails.
It's fascinating you say that, because for someone that's, not got any qualifications, you were so prolific, particularly like from 1989 right through to like 2005. You just didn't stop. You kept pumping them out, and you never slowed down. What kept you going? Like, what was it? Just the fun of making movies? Were you just looking for the next weird thing? What motivated?
4 kids.
Yeah,
that's the funny answer. And it's a big one, because I never turned anything down.
Yeah, right.
I had 4 kids. I was, you get driven by, you get mouths to feed, you got payments to make. And so, but I had thought that, that I would, I thought, well, of all the ways I made money, it seems like making movies would be the most fun. Just there's so many different things you do. It's not, I had an art supply store. Every day you go and you look at the inventory. An art supply store, different businesses, they have a certain. I loved everything I did. Especially when I was younger, I was a carpenter. I ran a carpenter crew. I speculated in houses, whatever, to make a living, because you have to understand, I grew up in the late 60s. I came, that's when I was in college. And, they used to say, turn on, tune in, and drop out. And I was one of those unfortunates that took it to heart. And so the idea was get out of society, go to the country, and then after the revolutions come. Well, it didn't come.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. It's like Jesus, didn't come back. And so then you kind of go, gee, now I'm like in my 20s, and I got to make a living, but I didn't prepare for it.
Yeah, you're right.
So then I tried whatever I could. And when I saw the movies, when I first tried doing an amateur movie, I thought, wow, I just really like this. I liked all the different things that you did. And plus, I was a great movie fan, like we all are. And so when I started understanding scenes and shots, and and you kind of see, you're trying to see how the magic is done. You try to get out of your subjective experience of the movie and kind of go backstage and see, well, can you actually do that? Could you make it happen? Could you, and what makes it better or worse, or it's of course very, very complicated. I think 90% of it is technical, but there's that 10%. It either is it the script, is it the direction, is it the acting? What is it that makes it all come together? And of course, it's very easy to keep score, just like in that movie, The Hustler, about pool, where Jackie Gleason says, the way we keep score is who has the most money at the end.
Totally.
How well you play. And I think that was one of the things that attracted me to movies as opposed to, say, artwork. With art, it almost seemed like it was kind of a smoke and mirrors game.
Yeah, right.
But with movies, I thought, people pay to see it. It has value. If they don't,
Yeah.
I know it's not that simple but it is a way to judge what you're doing. I always wanted an audience. I didn't want to make art movies. Although art movies are a very more than respectable, but a very acceptable genre. Bergman. I mean, when I was in the 60s, all the great movies were European. It was Truffaut, it was Bergman, it was Fellini. It was like, and I can still watch a lot of those and be blown away. It is a certain genre.
Yeah. I find that horror is often influenced by political climates through the history of horror. And right now we're in a very, messy political climate, which I kind of think is a good opportunity for something like Society to, be rediscovered. Has the idea of like a remake or, a reboot of it ever been floated your way?
I've been in, there was a British company that had the rights for 2 years trying to do a series, which I think would be great.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Because there is no Freddy in Society. There's no Jason, it's the world, the world of Society.
There's just arse face.
Huh?
There's just the guy with the arse for face.
Well, that's a good character.
Considering all of the kind of the recent kind of, the weird, the lizard people conspiracy and all that, and there's always been it's the world is controlled by the 7 Jew bankers who live in a vault in New York and stuff like it's like a constant theme of this, that rich people are a different species. The 1% are,
well, that was the idea, is that the idea for me within that script, you have to understand the script is about a high school kid who thinks he might be going crazy. What I tried to do with it, based on my experience, was kind of lean it, one, towards the fantastic, and two, like really kind of bring out the incest and the class and the political or class, let's say, not political, but the class aspects of it. Now, that didn't work in the US when it came out. It was an abominable failure. Although in the UK, it was much more successful. But you see, the UK class it's almost like India and caste. I mean, class is very well, everybody understands it. And in US, there, especially in the 80s, the Reagan era, there's the mythology, the narrative is that there is no class, just about working hard and getting ahead.
Yep.
Well, that's a myth that if you believe it, then of course the movie doesn't work, right? Because you think somehow there aren't ruling families, there aren't, people, the people who are in the underclass, it's because they're just lazy and it's their fault. Yeah. And it's hard to break out of that frame of mind. But I think that the society is based on, it's basically based, it's cartoon Marxism, right? But the idea that there are people who exploit other people, whether they're Brahmins or they're aristocrats or czars or whatever. It's not such, that's the way the world is. What we did was just try to make a horror movie out of it. Not really a horror movie because it doesn't really have blood and everything, but maybe a surreal satire, or just Screaming Mad George and I used to refer to it as, what do we say? Psychofiction.
Right.
And psychofiction was that all your fears are real, but a lot of fun, but entertaining. Because
it really speaks to that that thing when a lot of people go through in adolescence where you do think for a while that maybe you are adopted.
Of course,
you don't relate to your parents, you don't relate to your friends, and even though outwardly you may be like Billy Warlock is in society, like incredibly popular, and he's got a hot girlfriend, and he's everything. He seemingly has everything, but he himself doesn't feel like any of it's real, like, or he doesn't deserve it, or like it really kind of hits those self-truths.
Yeah. He's seeing things that don't add up. I think we all go through that in adolescence, and I think it was there was a book I read about horror movies that said, horror movies or horror novel are about taboos, and the one taboo that seems to never be overcome is incest. So, and you see that with QAnon now, with this horrible wave of authoritarian politics, not just in the U.S. but in the world. You see it now in France, and I'm sure if it isn't there, it's coming to Australia. Because these things, we're all connected. Yeah. And what they tend to do is, I think there's this idea of what could be the worst thing the enemy is capable of. And it's generally, it's incest, it's cannibalism. That's the proliferation of zombie movies, or like The Walking Dead and stuff. It's because somehow it's just terrible to think that you would eat your own species.
Yeah.
The idea that you would have sex with your own family. These are civilizing taboos, and probably wasn't that long ago that human beings not only ate each other, but they also, of course, had sex with their families. And I think, and I'm guessing, that the reason it sort of fell out of favor was that the limited gene pool makes a problem.
Yeah.
And you end up with crazy royals and stuff,
Yeah. Well, I think that's like, if you go back and have a look at all of the kind of religious tenets that exist, like at the very heart of it, there's always like a health and safety kind of basis to it.
Exactly. Look at the kosher
100%
diets of Jews. I mean, you say don't eat pork. Well, there's a time maybe when hoof and mouth disease was pretty, and it was in the Middle East, and so the Islam also has that prescription.
Yeah.
And don't eat shellfish. Well, shellfish could be quite dangerous. Now, I don't know about don't eat dairy with meat and all that. I'm not saying it's all based on that.
But there probably is. There probably, it's like I know that when I make scrambled eggs in the morning, I like to because I can't be 100% sure of those eggs. I like to crack each one in a glass first, because if I put them all together and one's bad, I've spoiled the whole bunch. I want to check. I always think that's it's always you prepare.
You're revealing a lot about yourself.
Before we came into this conversation, I was talking to Ben, and I said, how the fuck am I going to transition from Shunting to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? So I'm just going to jump straight into that.
No, we don't want to go there.
We don't.
No.
Honey, I Shunted the Kids.
No, this is a taboo.
All I was going to ask you.
And those kids got real small. My point there is that, as people always say, how could you even come up with that? Stuart and I came up with it to make a movie for our kids. We both. Yep. Stuart had 3 kids. I had 4 kids. They were all real small in the 80s. So and we thought we should make a Disney movie like The Absent-Minded Professor. And so, but you got to think of it this way. That movie with a little darker lighting and a bad ending is a horror movie.
It's a horror movie.
Well, you know, I always
and
draw
that's the way horror is.
Yeah.
Fantasy is brighter. Look at H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Has horror. You know, he's famous for his cosmic horror, but he wrote a lot of these glistening cities. You know, the Dream Quest of the Unknown Kadath, and these brilliant fantasy things. He's just not known for it because somehow horror, I don't know why, but horror fans are more determined or more faithful than most fans, you know. I mean, I see it all the time. People are interested in old horror. I am. I watch old horror movies. I watch bad horror movies. That's how I know I'm a horror fan.
Yep.
I'm a fan of all movies,
Yeah.
but if it's a romantic comedy, it better be good.
Good Movie Monday is made possible with help from Kaiju Beer. Unashamedly intense Australian craft beer.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
yeah,
If it's a horror movie, I'll watch the bad shit
I think it's a universal truth.
and enjoy it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think it's a universal truth that the best nudity is in old horror films.
The best what?
The best nudity is the best
nudity.
nudity.
Oh, nudity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's totally exploitative without being pornographic.
Yeah.
I have always drawn a connection between kids' films and horror films. I think they are the most closely aligned kind of movies out of all the different genres. And it never surprises me when people like yourself who come from a horror, world step into family films. So it makes sense that you and Stuart worked on.
I like things that are fantastical.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that dark fantasy and fantasy can get dark and it can end up being horror. The same concept.
Do you have any involvement whatsoever with the upcoming sequel that they're doing?
No, and I don't. A sequel, or is it a remake?
It's both, because I think Rick Moranis is coming back, and
That's what they said.
Josh Gad is playing his son grown up.
I'm gonna believe it when they send me a check.
Yeah. I think it's definitely been greenlit and going to Disney Plus. So
I hope so.
Yeah,
I'm hoping.
So I'm going to pivot right now because there's a question I've been dying to know the answer to for a long time, and it involves Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, because that is my favorite Christmas movie of all time. It really is, but everybody knows that Mickey Rooney was in it, and he had famously protested the original film. Was that did he acknowledge that when he was making Part 5?
No, he never said anything about that. It's funny because the 4 was like it was Scream Mad George and the writer of Society, Woody Keith, and me kind of going way off the reservation.
Okay.
And we had no money, and we already had kind of a script, and we tried to do all this kind of weird simulacra stuff. And I didn't want to do a Christmas movie. So I totally kind of blew that off, right? Made the main character a Jew,
Yeah.
And then I regretted it.
Oh no, but you do have a great Christmas kill when the boyfriend's father gets strangled by the Christmas lights and set on fire by Clint Howard.
Well, we had
an amazing
something
sequence
like that, right? And he was an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
But then I regretted it. And I made that movie because a guy named Richard Gladstein, who worked for IVE Entertainment, later Live Entertainment, famous when the president's kids killed him. I don't know if you remember this story. But Richard he was like an executive at the company.
Right.
Kind of acquisitions. It was a video company back then. Like today, everything's streaming. Back in the late 80s, it was all video, right?
Yep.
The same thing. And so he bought Bride of Reanimator, which I was just finishing. So he had come to the set. And then he said, listen, I'm trying to make movies here. And for this certain budget, which was like a nothing budget, I got this, but I got the rights to the Silent Night, Deadly Night sequels. Do you want to do one? We already have a script about this kind of feminism, kind of witch thing. And I needed a job, of course, right? I never say no.
Yeah.
And so we jumped into it. And afterwards, I kind of regretted it, because I thought, why did I fight the Christmas thing?
Yeah.
You know, what was the point of that? And I was producing Guyver at that time. Did you ever see the Guyver?
Oh yeah, sure have.
Best guy in a suit doing kung fu you'll ever see in your life.
Fucking oath. Yes.
Yeah.
And Richard came to the set, and I told him, listen, I want to do a real Christmas one. So let's do part 5.
Yeah.
And I've got an idea. It's Killer Toys, because that would be a Christmas movie. And my script supervisor on Guyver was a guy named Marty Catrosa. And I had actually met him years ago when I was looking for a director. He was in New York. And I said, look, Marty is invaluable with the Guyver. You wouldn't think a script supervisor.
Yeah.
You know, I said, so let's get him to direct it. And so that's how we developed it. So Marty and I wrote the script for what I call Toy Boy. But it was, you know, that was like not kind of right for the times.
Yeah.
And so the idea was that Geppetto, right? I mean, we're so obvious with our references. Yeah. You know, and there's Killer Toys, and of course the boy is a toy.
Yeah, and it is my favorite Christmas horror film. I just watch it every single year without fail. It always gets me with that.
Mickey Rooney was just on a list. For that amount of budget, the video department would say, we need one of these actors, and they would have like 40 actors.
Yeah.
If one of those is in the movie, we can sell so many units. And so we'll finance the movie to this amount. And Mickey Rooney came in.
Yep. And
he never mentioned anything about being against Christmas movies. And he was just the best guy ever.
Amazing.
I mean, I had, you know, I was the producer. I wasn't directing. And we had to rent his Winnebago for him to have his rent, because it was such a cheap movie.
Yeah.
It was so cheap. But we rented his Winnebago, and then his assistant, who was also the driver, was sort of his same build. And that would be who would do all the rehearsals on set. Yeah. And when it was time to shoot, Mick would go out. So I spent many hours sitting, you know, next to the Winnebago where Mickey Rooney would be at the wheel, but he would always have the racing form and listening to the races. So how retro is that? Nobody bets on horse racing anymore. So that's a different generation from mine. And he was really into it. And he was about this tall. He was 70 years old. And he could, if I'd gotten in a fight with him, he would have flattened me. That guy was a bull, you know, and what a nice guy. I mean, I must say, this guy used to be the biggest star in the world when he was doing the Andy Hardy series, biggest in the world. And you would think to have to do a movie like Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 5 would just make you bitter.
Look, I love the fact that you took...
No way. You know what he told me one time? He said, you know what the most important, the biggest movie being made in Hollywood today is? I said, what? He said, this one, because I'm in it. And he went on the Tonight Show. I think that time it was Johnny Carson. And he mentioned the movie.
Amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, come on. Is that an actor? That's showbiz. That's someone who grew up in showbiz. You know, he's not like, oh, I've got to worry about my identity and how the public is seeing me. He's just an actor. I have nothing but good things to say about Mickey Rooney.
If I were you, one of my proudest moments would be the fact you took a Hollywood star like Mickey Rooney and put him in a movie where a guy gets fingered while fucking. Did he read the script? Like, come on.
He's an actor. He's to me, he's a bit like Corbin Burnson in The Dentist.
Yep.
Yeah.
Corbin came from an acting family.
Mm.
He knows nothing else.
Yep.
I mean, he doesn't have the pretension. You know, most of the people I know in acting and in the movies in general, they come out from outside like me. And there's this sort of pretensions about it. What's my career? Who am I? How do I measure up? But people who grow up, I think people who grow up in acting families, they're a little, I think they just see it as like, it's acting.
It's like a job.
No, you just do it.
Yeah.
You know, you're up, you're down, you're sideways, you know, and that's something that I absolutely admire because I love show business, you know.
Well, that's all, I always think that from, and once this is an outsider perspective, but it seems to be the big difference between actors in the UK and actors in America, where the actors in the UK, for them, it's like it's a job, like, you know, and the entire film industry seems set up that way. Like, you wake up in the morning, you go to work, at the end of the day, you come home and you have dinner with your family, and that's, you know, there's none of the pretensions and stuff. And with a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of the people who come into it in the US, they think they're Tom Cruise. Like, that's, everyone's, you know, just working to try and get to be Tom Cruise.
I'm not sure. I mean, I cast a lot of movies out of London, and I'm not completely in agreement with you because there's a lot of pretentiousness. Yeah. Maybe I'm the next Laurence Olivier. You know? Yeah. You know, but I agree with you that the thing about casting in the UK as opposed to LA is that most everybody who comes in has been trained. They go to acting school. I think they're like almost like universities or institutes or something.
Yeah. So
they have a bit of training or formation, and so the lowest level is going to be higher than what you get in LA. It's going to, because they've been trained. In LA, people get training, but it's from whatever, some don't, but it's from the Meisner school, or it's different schools of training, and there's big agent thing going on. So you can read people, you can audition people in LA. In London, almost anybody who would be brought in for an audition would be capable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In LA, you could have people come in who weren't who weren't good. The difference is that the high end in LA is much higher.
Yeah.
In London, there's almost this ceiling to greatness or something. Whereas in LA, you never know. You might get somebody who could be a star, you know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the guy in The Dentist. What was his name? He just had a 2-day part. He was great, you know.
No, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. What's his name? He's the Hulk now.
He's huge, yeah.
Yeah, he's huge.
Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo just has it. Like,
Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
And I remember watching him on the part. I mean, we did a regular audition, and then we hired him. Yeah, he's great. You know, it's a small part, and he came in and did the part. And I remember watching him work, and I thought, this guy is good. You know, he's like, wow. He really, because you got to come in, do the pages, and get the fuck out. It's not like we're doing a whole bunch of rehearsals and stuff, and you're not the main guy.
Yeah.
And then I remember the casting director called me a few years later. He says, guess who is hitting it big? I said, who? He said, Mark Ruffalo. I said, what? That guy? I mean, he was really good. Yeah. And now, of course, he's a huge character. But I think that's what you could get from LA. You know, hey, what's the name of the guy who? And I'm not saying this is a great actor, but my wife worked in the casting for Silent Night 4. And they, I think it was 4, maybe it was 5. And the main character, one of the actors that we didn't take was the guy who ended up being on Friends, the kind of dopey jock.
Oh, David Schwimmer?
No.
The jock.
Joey.
Oh yeah, Matt LeBlanc.
Hey, listen, just let me pause this.
Sure.
So I'll be right back. Anyway, I'm not saying Joey is a great actor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you get a Tom Cruise or something. But I do think, I mean, that's a prejudice I have about the UK acting.
Yeah.
The level of competence is higher than in LA, but the ceiling is higher.
Yeah.
In California.
I wonder if it is because of that training, like because you're kind of, you know, you're told what to, you kind of, you know, I can't even lost the ability to speak, but you're trained to be a certain way, and that inhibits the kind of natural creativeness of someone who has no training, who can just come in and just.
Well, in LA they do have training. It's different.
Yeah,
it's different. There's lots of schools.
Yeah.
Stella Adler, Meisner. You know, there's different trainings. It could just be because LA's a bigger pond.
Yeah.
It's a bigger business, so you're going to have bigger stars. It could just be that, you know. But
you also,
I just read a book that's incredibly interesting called The Method. And it's the history of, like, from Stanislavski all the way through to like the 90s, about how acting changed with Stanislavski and the the Moscow Arts Theater, and how they went, because back then in the 1800s, early 90s, acting was symbolic. They would learn certain kind of gestures to to stand for emotions and actions. And then there was this idea of going to realism. Stanislavski he was like Screaming Mad George. He just had mad ideas, he was just pushing things. And then it evolved. And when it came to America and went through the group and all in the 30s and into the 40s, I didn't realize that most of the big actors of the 60s, 70s, 80s all came from that. That there is training. There are different ways of training, So I don't know. Like I said, it could just be that that it just has to do with the fact that Hollywood makes huge movies, so they have to have huge stars,
You also had to cast a handful of movies in Spain. I want to quickly talk about the Fantastic Factory stuff.
I did 9 movies there. What are you talking about?
I know. Well, that's what I mean. Like, you've done 9, and I think they're some of the most insanely underrated horror films, of the past 20 years, for sure. Like, Dagon is like a masterpiece. I really love Beyond Reanimator. Roman Sartre, and particularly Faust, For Love of the Damned. I think that is a movie ahead of its time. Was that a good experience, The Fantastic Factory?
Yeah, well, it was great because I was really during the 90s, I had realized that it seemed like I was going to be kind of in the business of making low budget movies. And I think because I didn't have any kind of formation, I didn't have any real training. And secondly, I knew nothing about the movie business when I came out here, nothing. So I didn't have and I was too old to have a mentor, right? I think I was 34 years old when I moved to LA. I mean, when I made Reanimator, I was in my mid-30s. It's not like I was like a 23-year-old or 25, And when you're in your 20s, you have mentors, theoretically. Somebody can help you. When you get into your 30s, ain't nobody helping you. Yeah. You're competition. Yeah. You're grown up. When you're 35, you're kind of officially grown up. Yeah. Nobody's going to go, oh, let me help you. They're going to help somebody who's 23. They don't see as a threat. And so I didn't have any idea of the business. I didn't know how it worked. All I knew is that I would like to make movies. And of course, the egotist that I wanted to be in charge. Yeah. I didn't want to fit in. I just wanted to be in charge. So that kind of led me to being the big fish in the little pond, And it meant that the problem with low budget movies, if you're trying to make a living making movies like I was, the problem with low budget is the fees are low. I mean, it's bad enough that you have to fight to do anything with a small budget, but you're not getting paid much. Yeah. So I kind of started feeling, man, I got to make about 2 or 3 movies a year to feed my family. Yeah. And the best way to do it is not to have to start over every time. If you had a label, a brand, my goal was to have a Hammer film.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Or Roger Corman's Poe movies, or what's his name? The Tingler, and what's his name?
Oh, William Castle.
William Castle, American International. Well, I'm not sure that was quite the same. Certainly, the Poe series of Corman was. Like, I would go see any Poe movie by Corman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in junior high. And in Hammer, I used to go to the video store when it was VHS, and there'd be a shelf for Hammer, right? And you would look at it and you go, I've never heard of this. What the Reptile Woman?
Yeah.
And I would think, it must be a bad one. Got to see it.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's Hammer.
It's Hammer, yeah.
There's a context. And so what I tried to do in the 90s is I kept pitching these ideas for making a label. One of them that I actually sold to Miramax, they didn't make any movies of it, was the 7 Deadly Sins of Horror, which was, the idea was to give 7 horror directors a sin, and then use all the classic horror actors and the classic, horror actors, directors, effects guys. Well, it ended up, I think, evolving into Masters of Horror, which I had nothing to do with, but I did share the idea with the creator of that. I sold it, but Miramax didn't, the Weinsteins didn't make any of the movies. And I have the.
Please finish with the card.
Okay, just a second. Hold 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, I had my car detailed. Yeah, had to pay him, and now it's 6 o'clock. I get to have a drink.
Oh, nice. There you go.
There you go. It's too early for you guys, so don't even think about it.
As they say,
don't even think about
it. They've always said in Australia, like, it's 6 o'clock somewhere.
But what time is it in Melbourne?
11 a.m.
11.
Yeah, that's too early. I'm still drinking oolong tea. Then I drink oolong tea all day long.
I saw, not that you can believe everything you read on the internet, but I did see IMDb has listed a 4th Reanimator with Charles Band directing. Is that a thing?
No, I think Charlie Band is trying to pretend that he's doing a sequel. He's someone who's ethically challenged.
Yeah, we know it. We know it. Okay,
he's been a thorn in my side for a long time.
And many sides. He's been a thorn in many sides.
Yeah. I don't know I'm getting too old to worry.
Yeah,
I spent 2 years suing him.
Oh,
right.
And paying lawyers. I think the lawyer bill was like $160,000.
Oh my goodness.
It was just terrible. And of course, it settled.
Yeah.
And I got all my legal bills. But, I never got the money that really I should have gotten. If he hadn't been such a schmuck, I would have made millions off a Reanimator.
It is such a common story. We've spoken to a lot of people, and it's the same story every time.
You know what? I lived the Hollywood story, right? Isn't that the Before I came out to LA, when I was just making my amateur movie, and I was in North Carolina at a college town where I lived, and I had gotten some guys that had graduated from the film school at the college. It was the University of North Carolina. And it wasn't even called a film school then. It was called the Radio, Television, and Motion Picture Department. Back then, they didn't even have it as a regular, it wasn't even a film school. It was radio, it was TV. But anyway, I started realizing I wanted to make movies, and we would talk to anybody who had any connection with the movies, because we knew nothing. No internet, remember, no fax machines. Are you kidding? This is 1979. Just books, right? And this one old guy that we went to talk to, and he probably isn't even as old as I am now, right? But he seemed old to us. And he had been in Hollywood. And so we were like, oh, what's it like, And he said, hookers and thieves. Hookers and thieves, as he sipped on his bourbon. And I thought, God, what a depressing guy. And now, after being out here for 40 or 50 years, hookers and thieves, I don't know. It seems reasonable.
It's a perfect title for your next film.
Hookers and thieves. No, I don't think you could do it in the Me Too era.
No, that's the
You
truth.
can do thieves. You can do thieves. You know.
Yeah.
Maybe if you did hookers and thieves and Dagon, and then
Dagon?
had, like a Dagon cult in Los Angeles, like
Yeah.
with like Heidi Fleiss, like get Heidi Fleiss in there or something.
Well,
like
now if you had Heidi Fleiss, it would be okay, and she would be the hero.
yeah.
That's right. So, do you watch many modern horror films? Like, how do you feel
I
about
don't
them?
watch a lot of them. I'm sorry to say that I find most of them.
Good Movie Monday is made possible with the support of people like Viewlorium. Viewlorium is a streaming platform for rare and obscure movies, and it's absolutely free. They also have a catalogue full of kids' flicks, classic movies, foreign cinema, and more. Visit viewlorium.com today to see what it's all about.
Kind of really long and boring and pretentious. I don't know.
I think
I
you'll
don't
get a
know.
kick out of
I just
Midsummer because
don't-
there's lots of orgy stuff in that.
What?
Midsummer has a lot of orgy stuff.
Oh, yeah, I
right?
like that.
Yeah.
Well,
there you go.
that's a European movie, a Scandinavian movie. It's slow, but what I like about it is that it's like different.
Mm.
It's a different kind of cultural history. You know, it's like Wicker Man, the original, not the new one. You know, there's when I went to Indonesia and was trying to make a fantastic factory there that I called Komodo Films. And we were just started doing when the Great Recession happened.
Mm.
Right.
So it kind of killed it all. But what really intrigued me about Indonesia, which I love it, I moved there, I loved it, is that their stories are so different from Europe's.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we weren't just dealing with werewolves and vampires and zombies and Frankenstein. They just have all these weird kind of legendary kind of ghosts and demons and stuff. And I really thought that the fun would be to exploit that and make movies based on that for the world, international audience.
Yeah.
And it was a disappointment, but we didn't get to do it. But
What a shame. That sounds
that's, I
amazing.
think, one of the things that we, I think that's why we love J horror, Japanese horror.
Yeah.
You know, because, I mean, of course, it's always the girl with the hair in front of the face. You know, but it was different from a bunch of kids going into a cabin in the woods, you know,
Yep.
a
Totally.
killer with a different kind of mask on.
But it's funny that you mention it because we played The Sadness at Monster Fest last year.
The
And
what?
The Sadness. I don't know if
I
you've
haven't
heard of
seen
that.
it.
Haven't seen it. I actually think the guy who directed it, Rob Jabaz, I don't know if he's actually not American, but it's from Taiwan. They made it in Taiwan. But
Oh,
there's definitely a big shunting influence in that film. Like, because it's like a zombie film, but they're not zombies. They're just infected with complete apathy towards any kind of moral compass. So it's like the entire city that it's set in descends into this where everyone's getting killed. They're getting killed or fucked or both at the same time.
it's kind of like The Purge.
Yeah, very much.
all year
Yeah.
round. You know?
Yeah, but everyone's like anything is taken to the extreme. Like it's not just, it's totally insane. But still almost unlike anything else, you've kind of ever seen. Like it's a completely fresh take on the zombie film, like kind of like 28 Days Later was, where it was rage rather than the
Well, they
undead.
made it fast.
Yeah, and they made it fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big one. I think 28 Days Later. You know, I've always felt like Night of the Living Dead was the beginning of the modern age of horror.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, of course, reaching its apogee with the Walking Dead, right? And now there's so much zombies, and of course it's going to have to end. But it's going to end with a generational shift, I think. I think everything from politics to art, culture, it's all based on generations. And the generations, it seems like, usually it's like 3 generations that span an era, and then things all change. I feel like Night of the Living Dead was it. It really made a difference, and we didn't see it right away.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of introduced realism. It was realistic. It was like realism in there.
It was zombies. It was being afraid of people next to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, I think in the early 2000s, there was a movie that was called Cabin Fever.
Yep.
And it was basically Evil Dead, right?
Yep.
Except that the kids actually rented a cabin that you might want to stay in, right? In Evil Dead, you go, what the? Why are you going to this crappy? It was terrible. It's not comfortable, right?
Yeah.
With Cabin in the Woods, there's a nice lake. It's a nice, comfortable cabin. And then with Evil Dead, it's Necronomicon, man. It's evil. It's evil. But in Cabin in the Woods, I'm infected with something that makes my skin come off.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to kill me because they think they're going to catch you.
Yeah.
And that's the modern idea of a zombie. Early idea, we didn't know what it was. The really early idea of a zombie is someone who lost their soul. It's
reanimated. Yeah.
And then with Night of the Living Dead, it was basically based on a vampire book called I Am Legend. I mean, not based on it, but inspired by it. Yeah. And of course we know that vampires and zombies are 2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Right? The zombie has no taste. The vampire is a thief, only wants blood. But they're both basically the same thing.
Sure.
And the as Anne Rice showed us,
the
most important vampire book since Bram Stoker was Anne Rice. When Romero did his, he didn't say how they became living dead.
Yeah.
He just said it could have been on the TV. They say, there's a satellite came back down. It could have brought something, who knows what it is. In the second one, Dawn of the Dead, the tagline was, when hell is full, the dead will walk the earth. Best tagline in horror movie history.
Yeah, it's great.
When hell is full. Wow.
It conjures an image in your head.
The putrefaction, the evil has gotten so full that hell can't contain it. And now it's oh my God. I mean, this is macabre.
Yeah.
But then, of course, with Day of the Dead, Romero started believing all the critics that said he was a social commentator.
Yeah.
And then we got into where we're at now, which is that every horror director is making some kind of political statement, It's just kind of...
I wonder if the past 2 years of pandemic are going to change the face of horror moving forward once we're beyond it. If it's going to influence.
Well, I think it'll change with generations. I think that Get Out was a big change.
Yeah.
Which also has debt to society. Get Out.
Yeah, totally.
When everybody's in the house looking up, Although the problem, I think we're now in the phase of message forward horror movies. Everything's message forward. Yes. It's not let's make a great entertainment like Dawn of the Dead. Just a great horror movie. And then the critics go, oh, it's about consumerism. And, and you kind of go, okay, that's fine, because every movie reflects the era in which it was made.
Yep.
But when the movie makers start, I had I remember I went to a festival once in the 90s, and I was hanging out with a couple of French critics, horror movie guys. I think we were in Italy. And one of them said, I just want to tell you one thing we do to kind of have fun with horror directors. He said, we'll just ask them, do you consider yourself a political director? Well, yes, I have great ideas, and this is the worst thing you can do to a creative person is kind of reinforce the idea that somehow they have something important to say. Because you know how it is. It almost nobody does, But all of a sudden, it's like celebrities getting on their soapboxes about some political or some, and you go, what the fuck do you know? You spend all your life in a Winnebago waiting for your agent to call and trying to get more per diem.
Yep.
Who's the worst person? When you go to movies where they have, I always go to the movies. I live in Hollywood, so I go to like the movies where they have the director or somebody come out and talk, or they have it after the movie. On the old ones, they'll have 5 people talking, or I don't know, somebody who's involved, because it's always interesting as a fan to hear from, anecdotes. And the people who have the least to say, or if you listen to the commentaries on a Criterion edition or something, the actors usually don't know anything about the movie. Because all they know is their part.
Their part, yeah. I reckon
they were offered the part, and they went and they sat in their dressing room. And then they came out to do the thing, and they got their agent, right? And so you kind of go, wow, you're better off talking to a PA, a production assistant, who might have kind of, you're better talking to the banker who made the deal. You know what I mean? So someone who spends their life making movies doesn't necessarily know anything about politics or, but once you make people feel like they're important, then I think it can be kind of embarrassing. And I think with something like Get Out, for example, that was really, I think, one of the most important movies that did message forward, because it was right during the Black Lives Matter. And it was this idea that you could make racism be a monster, just like what society makes class system be a monster, which is kind of cool. But on the other hand, for me, in some ways, it subverted the whole genre, because I look at it and I go, just a minute. Are you really taking the genre seriously? Are you taking the horror movie seriously? Because if you are, why would incredibly rich, powerful white people, right? Incredibly powerful, who have this technology that allows them, as they get old, to put their consciousness, their brain in this case, into a young body. Why would they choose the most maligned, discriminated upon people in the country?
Yeah.
And live in a barn? Why? Because he can run fast?
Yeah.
Why not put your consciousness in the captain of the Yale boating team, whose family comes from a ton of money and who's this big strapping guy who's got. So you follow the argument there. The argument is sometimes the message forward undermines just a horror movie.
Yeah.
But I guess
you're going to reflect the times anyway. Like when the scene at the beginning of Get Out, when the cops stop him, hey, that was pretty good, I thought, because it really got you in the moment.
Yeah.
But when you finally get to the solution to the whole thing, you kind of go, I don't know, you know, can't you just do a horror movie? You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Did you have something else to add there, Ben?
No, it's okay.
I was going to say, I'm glad that you kind of brought it full circle back to Society, because we're going to have to wrap up now. But it's been a huge pleasure for me, I'm sure for Ben as well, to be chatting with you, mate. It's it's been a thrill.
Well, I will tell you this about Society. I'm right in the middle of reading the novelization.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how's that panning out?
It's pretty disturbing. It's by one of the authors of the script, the main guy.
Yeah.
Now, his name was Woody Keith in the movie, in the credits, but now he has changed his name to Zeph Daniel. And so he wrote the novelization, which should come out in the next few months. And he kind of filled in a bit of the mentality, the psychology.
Very nice.
You're right.
And it's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, that kind of brings me back to what I was saying about, like, it would play well in today's world, and the fact he's novelized it, you know, it's exciting.
Yeah, well, I think Society works better now than it did.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I was in the. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. In the commentary on the Arrow Society disc, you were talking about how at the time that Society came across your desk, you were working on, was it The Men? A movie called The Men, and then yeah, right. Oh, with Dan O'Bannon, that's right. Yeah, and it fell through, and you put all your ideas and stuff that you had for that into Society.
Well, yes, it was. The Men was about a woman who discovers that all men are aliens.
What a great idea!
Yeah.
And so that's
hang on, not all men.
All men. if you're a real man.
Yeah.
Okay? Now the thing is that fits the conspiracy theories, which we discussed earlier, that conspiracy theories are all based on this idea, almost, I think every one, that there's this secret group that is running everything that we don't know about. Whether it's the Rothschilds or the whatever it is, It's always about a secret group that you don't know anything about, and it is pervasive in the whole world. So The Men was an idea that Dan O'Bannon had, and I worked with him for like 9 months on it. And it was about a woman who discovers that all men are aliens. And it's fantastic because it's got that satirical, already it's satirical, right? It's ironic.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it works very well now. It would have worked great in 1989.
No, I think it's perfect now with the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because, I think we've made sexuality, the modern idea of sexuality is more of a continuum. It's not a dialectic. It's not two poles.
Yes.
And so it kind of takes the fun out of it. It kind of confuses it. But that when I did get financing, Dan backed out. And so I was stuck, and I thought, man, I just spent almost a year with this paranoid kind of idea of this secret world. And when I got the script of Society, immediately I was back there. I thought, well, this is that, except it's a teenage hijinks movie.
Yeah.
Right? Because Society is constructed as a high school romp. One of the 80s, there were these 80s high school movies where you got the girlfriend and there's some sex involved, and the guy that you're competing with. It was a high school movie.
Yeah.
Comedy. But it was like, wow, there's something dark underneath. There's some, and of course, from my sensibility, was the idea of making it more surreal, more expressionistic. So things were a little more, everything was more extreme. And of course, with Screaming Mad George, we had all those images. But the idea that there was some horrible secret, which I think for adolescents is very easy to believe.
Yeah.
And yes, that's how it felt getting that script.
Well, mate, thank you so much for giving us so much material to talk about on the show, because shunting is a common occurrence on our show, isn't it, Ben?
Let's go to the shunt, oh baby. Shunters in the night. Hey, there's a ton of those,
shunting.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, you've just given me the perfect. You've just given me the perfect cut point there.
Everybody gets one of them. You can come up with 100 of them.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian, thank you, mate. We'll let you get on with your evening and your drink there, and thank you so much, mate.
Thank you very much.
It was fun. Anytime. Bye-bye.
Thank you, mate. Have a good night.
For Bill Whitney,
I've never been paranoid.
fear plays a large part in family life.
I feel like something's gonna happen. And if I scratch the surface, there'll be something terrible underneath.
He's afraid his sister
Could you zip me up, Billy?
is not what she seems.
God, Bill, what's the matter with you?
He thinks his friends are out to get him.
Make waves, Whitney. You're gonna drown.
People are what they are. Now you have to learn to accept that.
He's about to find out the truth.
Why are you guys doing this to me, huh?
What, you've been living with these people all your life and you didn't know anything about this?
Is far worse than he could ever imagine.
If you don't follow the rules, Billy, bad things happen.
Didn't you know, Billy boy? The rich have always sucked off low-class scum like you.
Uh-oh, Billy.
Clarissa? Don't be so intense. Now, some people make the rules and some people follow the rules. It's a question of what you're born to.
You never were one of us.
You know, you really deserve what's going to happen to you. I don't think so. Wait.
Can't you see they're setting you up for something?
You know how I hate to give you drugs.
You're officially dead.
Don't go home, Billy.
No.
Bill Whitney is about to become one
Showtime, Billy!
with society.
Who are you? Let me give you a hand, Bill.
In Beverly Hills, what you fear is only the beginning.
Anything for society.